my favourite things about gardening is watching the flowers bloom. They're really pretty, but it also usually means that there's some fruit on the horizon. But if you have herbs that are starting to flower, you'll usually want to cut these off so that your plant can continue to produce nicely flavoured leaves. Don't throw the flowers away though, because a lot of these flowers are also edible. Today I'm going to show you how to make a really striking fresh egg pasta that's laminated with herbs and edible flowers. It does take a bit of time to make, but the end result is really worth it and it's very beautiful, so take some time on the weekend and have a go. So here I have some thyme, which is starting to flower, so I'm going to cut some of these flowers away and take some cuttings of fresh thyme as well. I will leave some of the flowers for the pollinators because they really like them. My chive is also starting to flower, and chive flowers are just really striking. They're this lovely bright purple colour and the petals have a mild oniony, chivey flavour. So I'm going to take some cuttings of the flowers and also some of the chive itself. I'm also taking some sage leaves. I'm looking specifically for the younger, smaller ones here, because the bigger ones will be a bit too thick and woody for this recipe. So this is what I've collected from my 3 outdoor herb plants. I'm also going to add some baby basil leaves and some parsley from inside. So first you're going to make the pasta dough because you want that to rest. So in a bowl you want to add 100 grams of plain flour per person. Traditionally pasta uses 00 flour, but that's quite tricky to find, especially nowadays, so I'm just using plain here. If you're struggling to find flour, I'll leave a link below. I managed to get some from a wholesale supplier near me, but if you still have no luck, you can try using fine semolina instead, or a mix of any other kinds of flour, and you can even try self-raising flour. Pour out your flour on a clean surface and make a deep well for your eggs. You want 1 egg per 100 grams, so I'll have 2 here for 2 servings. Keep your eggshells. You can give them a wash and remove as much of the inner membrane as possible and then dry them out in the sun. And then you can use them to add calcium to your soil for your plants. Crack your eggs into the well that you made, and you're going to be whisking these with a fork, so make sure the well is really deep before you do this or something like this will happen. Don't worry if this happens to you though, it's not the end of the world. Just try not to lose any of the egg and keep mixing it in with a fork. You could probably also just do this in a bowl to minimize the mess. So keep mixing with your fork to incorporate the flour, and after a point you'll have to switch to using your hands. So start mixing the flour in with your hands and just keep incorporating it more and more from the outsides. It might look like it won't come together, but just keep going. Eventually your dough will start to look like this. I think this took me about 5 to 10 minutes. You can test to see if the dough is ready by just pressing it gently, and it will feel similar to the flesh on your pan. At this point you want to rest the dough on your counter for 30 minutes, and you can get on with prepping your herbs and flowers in the meantime. So after you've washed and dried your herbs, you want to rip them up into small bits, leaving behind any thick or woody stems. I also have some baby basil leaves here that I'm gonna just pull apart and add to the mix. These are the sage leaves. I've got some bigger ones that I'll tear up, and the smaller ones I'll just leave whole because they're quite soft. The chives are simple enough, you can just rip them up, and for the thyme you can just take the leaves off and leave the woody stalks behind. For the flowers, you should just be able to pull them straight out from the stalks. The chive flowers are made up of lots of these little clusters, and you can pull them off whole, or you can remove the petals individually. They're really thin and delicate though, so I'm just going to do a mix of the two and not worry too much about getting individual petals. When you've prepped all your flowers and herbs, just give them a quick mix and then they're ready for the dough. So after 30 minutes is up, give your dough a few quick kneads, and then you want to squish it into a rectangular shape. If you're using a pasta machine, you want to squish it out enough to fit through the thickest setting. So I'm going to cut my dough into two so that I can do that a bit easier. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and start rolling with a rolling pin. Make sure the dough is floured nicely at all times so it doesn't stick at all. Then, if you're using a pasta machine, put it through the thickest setting, which is usually number 1. Then you want to dust it with flour again if it needs it, and then put it through the same setting again. I usually put my pasta dough through the machine 3 times on each setting before I move up to the next one. Keep doing this and dusting with flour as needed until you get to setting 6. Or if you're using a rolling pin, that's about 2 or 3 millimeters thick. And if you're struggling to hold on to your pasta at any point because it's getting too long, you can just cut it to a more manageable length. Once you've rolled out your pasta 3 times at setting 6, fold the dough in half and make a mark with a butter knife at the halfway point. You're not trying to cut the dough, this is just so you know how far to spread out your herbs and flowers. Then take your herbs and flowers and sprinkle them over the dough up until the point that you marked. Make sure you don't have any herbs that are too thick or too sharp because they might tear the dough when you roll it out again. When you've sprinkled as many flowers and herbs as you like, take the other half of the dough and fold it over so you have a kind of pasta dough sandwich with your herbs and flowers in the middle. Press down gently so that they stick to the dough, and then you're going to put that through the machine or roll it out once again. Make sure the dough is floured really nicely because you really don't want it sticking at this stage. Then you're going to put the dough back through the pasta machine. Ideally, you're going to do this at setting 5 because you've just folded the dough over itself, so it's thicker than it was before, but I forgot to do it, so don't worry if you do too. If you have any herbs or flowers falling out, don't worry about that either, because they can just go in the sauce or a garnish. So this is how your dough will look after you've put it through setting 6 again 3 times. It's basically ready to cut into any shapes that you want now. So I'm going to cut my pasta into pappardelle. So I'm cutting it in half first to make it a bit more manageable, and then cutting the strips with a sharp knife. Make sure each strand is nicely coated in flour so that it doesn't stick. And that's it! You've made some really pretty and very yummy fresh egg pasta. To cook this, just put it in some well-salted boiling water for about 3 minutes and then toss it simply with some olive oil and parmesan and a squeeze of lemon.